Later that night, the ladies get on a Zoom call, and some of the same players that said, yeah, we'll authorize a strike, now those same players are saying, maybe we should take the deal. My money's drying up. Maybe we should take the deal. As a heated players meeting took place Sunday night.
Adam Silver just dropped a deadline. He March 10th. Get a deal done or risk delaying the entire season. And suddenly, the players who voted nearly unanimously to authorize a strike back in mid-December are having second thoughts. Some of those same voices that said, yes, we'll strike if necessary, are now saying, wait, maybe we should just take the deal. The money's drying up. Reality is setting in. And what happened next reveals a fracture that could determine the future of the league.
As Andy Constable reports, the WNBA held a virtual meeting on Tuesday night to discuss the state of CBA negotiations, the tone of which became tense almost immediately. Among the reasons for that tension, according to multiple sources, is the approach to negotiations and a potential strike. In the article, before we dive into it, a quick blurb. One of the causes of disagreements between players, according to multiple sources, is the approach to a potential strike. Players authorized a potential strike in a near unanimous vote in mid-December, but some players have changed their mind since. It seems that some players have finally realized.
According to multiple sources with direct knowledge, the WNBA Players Association held a virtual meeting on Tuesday night to discuss the state of CBA negotiations, and the tone became tense almost immediately. This wasn't a productive disagreement. This was conflict. The executive director, Terry Carmichael Jackson, later sent a letter to union members describing the conversation as spirited, passionate, and at times tough. That's corporate speak for things got heated. And here's what caused the explosion.
I gave up all my leverage when I authorized the strike. Players, as soon as you gave the executive committee all the power to strike when they deemed necessary, you guys lost all your leverage. All the power you thought you had as a single body entity within the large players association, you lost all that power. You said, here, executive committee, the power is now all in your hands. Somebody should have told you that. Maybe me, maybe I did mention it. Somebody should have said otherwise to you folks, but no. You said, here, strike. Take all my leverage, Kelsey Plum. Take all my leverage, Breanna Stewart. Take all my leverage, Nafisa Collier. Take all my leverage, Brianna Turner.
One of the primary causes of disagreement, according to multiple sources, is the approach to a potential strike. Players authorized that strike in a near unanimous vote in mid-December, but some players have changed their minds since. Think about what that means. These players gave the executive committee, led by President Nneka Ogwumike, complete authority to call a strike whenever they felt it was necessary. They handed over all their individual leverage to 7 players on that committee: Kelsey Plum, Breanna Stewart, Nneka Ogwumike, Brianna Turner. And now they're realizing what they gave away.
The Players Association held a virtual meeting with its members on Tuesday evening to discuss the state of labor negotiations. The tone quickly became tense as players discussed the best path forward, according to multiple sources with direct knowledge of the meeting. One of the causes of disagreement between players, according to multiple sources, is the approach to a potential strike. Players authorized a potential strike in a near unanimous vote in mid-December, but some players have changed their mind since. One source said more than half of player leadership reaffirmed their commitment to striking if necessary. The strike vote authorized the union's executive committee, made up of 7 players and led by President Nneka Ogwumike, to call a strike whenever it felt it was necessary.
The letter from Terry Carmichael Jackson tried to spin this as healthy union activity. She wrote that honest debate is not division, it's engagement. Everyone has different experiences in the league and in their life. And veteran guard Lexi Brown told Front Office Sports she didn't expect everyone to come into these meetings week by week and just be kumbaya and agree on everything. But here's what's actually happening beneath that diplomatic language. One source said more than half of player leadership reaffirmed their commitment to striking if necessary. Which means what? Nearly half did not reaffirm. That's not a minor disagreement about strategy. That's a fundamental fracture about whether to risk everything.
A letter sent from Players Association Executive Director Terry Carmichael Jackson to union members and obtained by Front Office Sports verified the tone of Tuesday's meeting. In it, she wrote, "Last night's conversations was spirited, passionate, and at times tough." Jackson went on to say this signaled the health of their union. Honest debate is not division, it is engagement. Everyone has different experiences in the league and in their life, veteran guard Lexi Brown told Front Office Sports. So I did not expect all of us to come into these meetings week by week and just kumbaya and everybody agree on everything. That's not reality. I can say this with 100% confidence. Lexi Brown's fed up with the executive committee. Lexi Brown is one of those players that said, no, I'm not authorizing a strike.
And I can say this with complete confidence. Lexi Brown is fed up with the executive committee. Everything she's said in interviews leans toward her being one of the players who voted no on authorizing the strike. Remember when Marcellus Wiley kind of spilled the beans, saying a certain player came up to him in the gym and described the situation? All signs pointed to Lexi Brown. She's been saying publicly, don't get greedy. That's not a neutral position. That's a direct challenge to the negotiating strategy. And after Tuesday's heated meeting, a group of more than 10 agents representing players of varying standing sent out their own letter to union leadership, offering to help in whatever way might be necessary to get a deal done.
Everything she said in interviews leans towards that. Remember, Marcellus Wiley kind of spilled the beans, saying a certain player came up to me in the gym, described this certain player, and all signs pointed to Lexi Brown. Lexi Brown has said, getting greedy. Shout out to Lexi Brown. The WNBA and Players Association had a virtual bargaining session on Monday, during which the league told players both sides needed to prioritize reaching an agreement by March 10th or be at risk of delays to the season. Additionally, league officials had calls with general managers to lay out a timeline for league business if a deal was reached by the second week of March. The league told GMs that if a deal is verbally agreed to on March 10th, it would not be signed until March 31st, according to multiple sources. In this timeline, the expansion draft will be held between April 1st and April 6th. Qualifying offers, including core designations, could be sent out on April 7th and 8th.
Let that sink in. 10 agents felt compelled to intervene. Those agents could represent 10 players. They could represent 30 players. They could represent 50 players. But they don't send that letter if their clients are saying, yeah, we're good, we're ready to strike, we're committed to the fight. They send that letter when their clients are panicking. When players are calling them saying, I can't afford to miss paychecks. I need to play. Get this deal done.
Followed immediately by a negotiating period from April 9th to 11th. The signing period will begin on the April 12th and extend through the 18th, a day before training camp begins. The WNBA draft will be held on April 13th. It will be the wild, wild west of WNBA free agency in the offseason. It would be nuts. It would also force players to think fast. Take this deal or don't take this deal. Come to this team or don't come to this team. Take my money or don't take my money. You're not going to have time to mull over seven different offers over 7 different days. You're going to need to be able to think quick and act fast. I actually like that, to be fair. I like a rapid fire free agency period. Boom, 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 boom.
Now let's talk about the timeline the league presented, because this is where the pressure really intensifies. The WNBA and Players Association had a virtual bargaining session on Monday. During that session, league officials told both sides they need to prioritize reaching an agreement by March 10th or risk delays to the season. Additionally, league officials had calls with general managers to lay out a timeline for league business if a deal was reached by the second week of March. And this timeline is aggressive. The league told GMs that if a deal is verbally agreed to on March 10th, it wouldn't be signed until March 31st. Then the expansion draft would be held between April 1st and April 6th. Qualifying offers, including core designations, could be sent out on April 7th and 8th, followed immediately by a negotiating period from April 9th to 11th. The signing period would begin April 12th and extend through April 18th, one day before training camp begins. The WNBA draft would be held on April 13th. This would be the wild, wild west of WNBA free agency. It would be absolute chaos. Players would need to think fast, take this deal or don't. Come to this team or don't. Take my money or don't. You're not going to have time to mull over 7 different offers over 7 different days. You're going to need to be able to think quick and act fast.
Into the season we go. Additionally, The pressure being placed on negotiations by the league has been met with confusion, as the union waited roughly 6 weeks for a counterproposal to one it submitted in late December. You submitted the same proposal over again. Expecting the league to respond to a proposal that they already said no to is ridiculous. They already said no. Just because you changed a few words, inserted a couple commas and question marks and exclamation points, doesn't make it a different proposal. Additionally, Jackson made it clear that a CBA would not become final without the vote of members. As was the case for the previous CBA, the union would need the majority of players who vote to be in agreement in order to reach a deal. In Jackson's letters, she told players a survey would be sent in the coming days to gather feedback on the league's current proposal. The union has used surveys at various points in the negotiation to gauge how players are feeling.
But here's where the union's argument starts to fall apart. The article notes that the pressure being placed on negotiations by the league has been met with confusion, as the union waited roughly 6 weeks for a counteroffer to one it submitted in late December. And this is where I need to call out the dishonesty. The union submitted essentially the same proposal again. They took their previous proposal, changed a few words, inserted a couple of comments and question marks and exclamation points, and sent it back. That's not a new proposal. The league already said no to that framework. Expecting them to respond to a slightly reworded version of something they already rejected is not negotiating in good faith. That's stalling.
One source told Front Office Sports. So she hasn't even sent out surveys to gather feedback from the league's current proposal yet, and the league sent the proposal, well, what is it, almost a week ago at this point? So who's dragging their feet right now? Quote, "We all want to play," Brown said. "We all want a fair CBA, but fair looks different to different people. So how do we get to a place where fair looks good to everybody, to the majority, to the minority, to the max players, to the role players, the rookies? How do we get to a place where fair looks the same?" The WNBA is waiting on a response from the union to its proposal sent on February 20th. In it, they made no movement on the proposed salary cap of $5.65 million per team or revenue sharing percentage. We've gone over that. Will they move on the salary cap? Potentially, but that $5.65 million is representative, directly mirroring the TV.
And check this out. Terry Carmichael Jackson made it clear that a CBA would not become final without a vote of the members, as was the case for the previous CBA. The union would need a majority of players who vote to be in agreement in order to reach a deal. In Jackson's letter, she told players a survey would be sent in the coming days to gather feedback on the league's current proposal. The union has used surveys at various points in the negotiation to gauge how players are feeling, one source told Front Office Sports. But here's the problem. The league sent its current proposal on February 20th. That was almost a week ago at the time of this meeting, and Terry Carmichael Jackson still hasn't sent out surveys to gather feedback from players on that proposal. So who's dragging their feet right now? Who's actually slowing down this process? The league set a deadline, presented a timeline, and made an offer. The union is waiting to survey its members about an offer that's been on the table for a week.
The only significant change was to team housing, which the league put back on the table for all players, but only in 2026. The league has provided housing to all of its players since 1999. 30 years, these players have not needed to pay for a single housing expense. That's crazy to me. Earlier this month, union president Nneka Ogwumike and vice president Elisha Clark told Front Office Sports that there were no fractures among the players. Instead, they both asserted that tough conversations were happening behind the scenes. There are so many things that are on the table in this proposal, and us having discussions doesn't equate to fracturing. Well, I'll tell you right now, if players that authorized strikes previously are saying, no, we actually take that back, no, we actually made a bad decision, that is called fracture. The significance of the fracture, we can debate another time, but that is actually representative of a fracture. That's like the Indiana Fever during the season saying, there is no setback with Caitlin Clark's injury, she's just going to be out for another extended period of time. Well, you actually just told me that there's a setback, but then told me that there isn't a setback? Interesting. After Tuesday's meeting, a group of more than 10 agents representing players of varying standing sent out their own letter to union leadership, offering to help in whatever way might be necessary to.
Lexi Brown's quote really captures the impossible position the union has created for itself. She said, "We all want to play. We all want a fair CBA, but fair looks different to different people. So how do we get to a place where fair looks good to everybody? To the majority, to the minority, to the max players, to the role players, the rookies? How do we get to a place where fair looks the same? That's the fundamental problem. Fair doesn't look the same to everyone, because different players have different financial realities. A max player like Breanna Stewart or Nneka Ogwumike can afford to miss paychecks. They have endorsement deals, overseas contracts, financial security. A role player making the minimum salary cannot afford to strike. That player needs every paycheck. That player has no leverage. And when you authorize a strike with a near unanimous vote, you're asking those role players to sacrifice everything for a deal that primarily benefits the stars. Now let's examine what the league actually offered in its February 20th proposal, because this is where the narrative gets interesting. The WNBA made no movement on the proposed salary cap of $5.65 million per team, or on the revenue sharing percentage. And the union immediately framed this as the league being unwilling to negotiate. But that $5.65 million salary cap is directly tied to the television deal. It's not an arbitrary number. It mirrors the revenue structure the league actually has. The only significant change in the league's proposal was to team housing, which they put back on the table for all players, but only starting in 2026. And here's a detail that should blow your mind. The league has provided housing to all players since 1999. For 30 years, these players have not needed to pay for a single housing expense. That's an enormous benefit that doesn't show up in salary figures, but represents tens of thousands of dollars per player per season. When you factor in housing, the actual compensation package is significantly higher than the base salary numbers suggest. Earlier this month, Union President Nneka Ogwumike and Vice President Eliza Clark told Front Office Sports that there were no fractures among the players. Instead, they both asserted that tough conversations were happening behind the scenes. Ogwumike said, "There are so many things that are on the table in this proposal, and us having discussions doesn't equate to fracturing. But if players who previously authorized a strike are now saying no, we actually take that back, we made a bad decision, that is called a fracture. We can debate the significance of that fracture, but it's absolutely representative of division." This is like the Indiana Fever during the season saying there is no setback with Caitlin Clark's injury, she's just going to be out for another extended period of time. Well, you just told me there is a setback by saying there isn't a setback. The reality is becoming clear. When you have 10 agents representing players of varying standing, sending a letter to union leadership offering to help get a deal done, that tells you the number of players who want to take back their strike authorization is significant. If there were only a handful of players having second thoughts, their agents wouldn't be organizing a collective intervention. Agents don't get involved like this unless their clients are genuinely worried. And they're worried because they're starting to understand the math. Think about what a strike actually means. It means missing paychecks during a season that's already short. It means losing the momentum the league built with Caitlin Clark's rookie season. It means risking the new television deal's promotional push. It means potentially alienating the expanded fan base that just discovered the WNBA. For what? For a salary cap that might go from $5.65 million to maybe $6 million. For revenue sharing percentages that won't significantly change until the league actually generates more revenue. The executive committee sold the strike authorization as leverage. We need the ability to strike so the league takes us seriously. But leverage only works if you're actually willing to use it. And as we're seeing now, many players are not willing to strike. Which means it was never real leverage. It was a bluff. And the league is calling that bluff by setting a hard deadline and saying fine, strike then, we'll delay the season, we'll lose the momentum. We'll all suffer together. Here's what makes this particularly fascinating from a labor negotiation standpoint. The players gave away their individual leverage when they authorized the strike. In a normal negotiation, each player maintains the ability to make their own decision. Some might be willing to strike, others might not. That creates internal pressure on the union to find a compromise that works for everyone. But when you authorize the executive committee to call a strike whenever they want, you remove that internal pressure. Now it's 7 players making the decision for everyone. And those 7 players are all stars with financial security. Breanna Stewart isn't worried about missing paychecks. Nneka Ogwumike isn't worried about missing paychecks. Kelsey Plum isn't worried about missing paychecks. But the player making league minimum, who's trying to save money for the off-season, that player is terrified. And that player just realized they gave away their ability to opt out of the strike individually. This is why Lexi Brown's comments are so significant. She's essentially saying we need to find a definition of fair that works for everyone, but we haven't done that, and I'm not sure we can. That's not a statement of unity. That's a statement of fundamental disagreement about what the union should be fighting for. And now we're watching the consequences play out in real time. A heated virtual meeting where things got spirited, passionate, and at times tough. A letter from the executive director trying to frame internal conflict as healthy debate. Multiple sources reporting that some players have changed their minds about the strike. 10 agents sending a letter offering to help get a deal done. All of this points to one conclusion: the strike threat is crumbling. The question now is whether the executive committee will acknowledge that reality, or whether they'll try to maintain the bluff even as it becomes obvious they don't have the support to actually strike. Because if they push forward with a strike that significant numbers of players don't support, the union will fracture completely. Players will cross the picket line. The league will continue with replacement players or delayed start, and the WNBA Players Association will lose all credibility in future negotiations. Adam Silver set a deadline of March 10th. That's not arbitrary. That's calculated. He's giving the union enough time to survey their members, have the difficult conversations, and come back with a realistic counteroffer. But he's not giving them enough time to continue stalling with reworded proposals and strategic delays. The clock is ticking. And based on what we're seeing from this Tuesday night meeting, a lot of players are ready to take the deal and move on. So here's my question for you. If you're a role player making league minimum, and you voted to authorize a strike back in December, are you regretting that vote right now? Because the stars who convinced you to give them that power aren't the ones who will suffer if the season gets delayed. You are. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you found this breakdown valuable, hit that subscribe button, because we're going to be covering every development in these negotiations as March 10th approaches.